So every community is completely different. Every event is completely different. I think everyone here probably knows Slack, but they may not know how Slack is building community. So why don't we start with just really quickly sharing what is community at Slack? What kind of formats are you running online, offline? What does your community program look like?
So community at Slack is a couple of different things. One thing is the in real life community program that I run that I came to Slack to build, which is started out really focused on developers, but has opened up to power users and admins and builders. There's also other pockets of community at Slack. So we have our maintainer community. There are a lot of people that are in open source that are working on like our SDKs and contributing to things like that. And then there's also kind of the community that our customer service reps are kind of cultivating. But the main focus for us and the thing that we're really driving on is this in-person volunteer-led community of people who are meeting up in real life to talk about Slack, whether that for them is building on Slack or using Slack or administering Slack. That's kind of where the bread and butter of community is for us right now. Each community focus is a little bit different. So the San Francisco group is a lot of founders. Shocking, right? Like so surprising. San Francisco founders, like what is that? So they talk more about like the apps that they're building for the app directory. They want to talk about monetization and getting users and how do you get traffic in. So it kind of is a mix of panels, fireside chats like this one. There have been some like mini hackathons or slackathons, if you will. And so there's a real mix and diversity based on how many people are showing up, who's involved, and what that specific local ecosystem is concerned with.
Yeah. And how did you get to the point where you knew how to run a program like this? You ran community with Branch for a while as well. Was this very similar? Did you like come to Slack and you're like, I know exactly what to do?
I came to Slack and I knew exactly what not to do. There were things, it's definitely not similar. So at Branch, we did have an ambassador program and a volunteer-led community for a really brief amount of time. It wasn't scalable the way that we built it out. And so we ended up bringing all the events in-house. And so we had a small community team that would work really closely with our sales team and our enablement team, and they would run the community events themselves. And that's totally different than what we're doing at Slack. We do occasionally run events, but it's more as a complement, not necessarily like doing it all ourselves. Or if we do it all ourselves, like recently our developer relations team was on tour in a couple of different parts of Asia and Japan, and the events that they did themselves were to launch that new chapter. So it's more as a facilitating kind of thing. And so that's a huge difference. And so I had, I read all the blogs and I've like been to a lot of other people's meetups and I watched all the videos, had David Spinks in my dreams. But I still felt like, there's also a big difference in the fact that when we started the community at Branch, it was brand new. Like this was a brand new industry. This was a brand new company. Like it was not, whereas with Slack, like I walked into 5 years of people being devoted to this product. And like, if I fucked it up, I was not going to be kindly received. So it was a lot more pressure in that regard as well.
Got it. And I'm actually curious, so how many of you are currently or planning to host events yourselves as an organization? Like your team is hosting the events? Okay. And how many of you are currently or planning to run a program where you have volunteers or hosts or members of your community self-organize events? And if you didn't raise your hand, what are you doing? Okay. Well, based on that very, very scientific survey I just did, it's about half and half. But so it's interesting. So you do both, but you're focusing a little bit more on that kind of distributed model, which it sounds like is helping you customize it to those local regions. Where in San Francisco, lots of founders have different needs than someone in another region might have.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and even founders from region to region, like a group of founders who are in Nairobi have a totally different set of problems than a group of founders who are in San Francisco. And so, but they can learn from each other. So one of my favorite things that is also different than what we did at Branch is that we, shocker, spoiler alert, use Slack for our digital and online PC. I know, right? Nobody uses Slack for community. So we're able to like connect not just the leaders together, which we had like a channel in our Slack workspace at Branch, so like they got to talk a little bit more, but getting the members to be able to communicate with each other in channels that are not dedicated to their ecosystem, like that's one of my favorite things to see, is when they're like, oh, we do have similarities as this person in Kenya who has these problems as a founder, and how can this person's experience in San Francisco inform it? And then in other cases, maybe we're talking about app developers who are in the middle of the country and don't have a lot of other people that are like them, who are working remotely, who are like, I am just building this thing and it feels like I'm in a vacuum. And so the fact that they can connect with other users and they can connect with other developers, both in person and in the workspace, is kind of marvelous to see.
Do you have an opinion on when a company should organize an event themselves versus when they should let the community self-organize?
I mean, I have an opinion. I don't know if it's the right one. So I think that it depends on a couple of things. One, what do your resources look like? Do you have the ability to dedicate time to creating resources for someone else to do something? And on top of that, are you going to be able to let go of the control? If you as a brand can't necessarily let go of that control, you probably want to look at hosting events yourself and building community internally. If you feel comfortable with that, if you're confident, and if you want also to like take some of that burden off of you, and maybe you don't have a strong marketing events team, maybe you have all of these people that want to get together, which is really why like the community at Slack came together, was out of research of people who are like, hi, we need this. If you don't have the resources to dedicate to one or the other, like choose one of them. If you can't hire someone to do marketing events, like or to do community events, don't invest in it as a company, because you're going to screw it up and alienate people, is my opinion. Enable your community to do it, because that you can do like you can build those resources out jointly. You don't necessarily have to have like one main community manager. Now, if that thing takes off and like you need to scale it, you better hire someone who is dedicated and specialized to that. But it can be a collaborative effort if it starts out smaller.
So like, I don't take Slack as a brand that doesn't care about controlling the brand, especially after that whole logo redesign journey. So how did you navigate that objection from the company? How did you help the rest of the organization feel comfortable with letting others run events using the Slack brand?
I mean, I'm not sure that everyone is still entirely comfortable with it, to be honest.
Work in progress.
It is definitely a work in progress. A lot of it is about communicating with the right stakeholders. So finding the person on the design and brand team who could be my champion to say it's important that we develop these assets. It's important that we have really clear brand guidelines for our chapter leaders. It's really important that we say, this is how we want you to, identify yourself on social media. And these are things that the chapter leaders really want too, because they want to be able to make decisions easily. They don't want to think about like, did I use the right color pink? Like, they just want to make something. They want to show off that they're part of it. And so I think that there are definitely still moments where people are like, oh my God, I think someone made something and it's not right. And I'm like, but is it really in the scheme of things damaging the brand for someone to be like, I love this thing and have like a slightly off color purple? Like, it's not our aubergine, but it's a dark purple. Calm down. Like, I'm
just imagining you saying that to a designer in the company and watching their head explode.
I usually say it over Slack so that we don't have to do the face-to-face.
Head exploding emoji. Okay, so let's dive into the actual events in a little bit. So you want to host an event for an organization, or anyone here wants to host an event, first off, like, why are you hosting an event? What's the purpose of the event? How do you know it's successful? Um, I find a lot of companies are like, let's host an event because it feels good and people will be happy and drink and be merry. But then afterwards, they're like, great, so how'd it go? How did it impact our business? And they have no idea. So how does it impact the business for Slack?
So a lot of what we're doing right now is about like feature adoption and feature awareness. So feeding things out to chapter leaders, and then they can adapt it for like what it is that matters to their community. So for instance, we have an annual conference for our developer community. It's called SPEC. It happens in October in San Francisco, and you can talk to me about it if you're a Slack developer. And this year, one of the things that we wanted to do, and it's only the second year, was like, how do we extend that content? And so we packaged up a bunch of the sessions and turned it into like small consumable meetup sized content. And the chapter leaders could pick out of this like list of 6 different types of events and run their own event. And what that did for us as a business was we released a bunch of cool new stuff for developers, but there were only 600 developers there. We have 500,000 developers. So like we didn't have a lot of penetration. And so by enabling the chapter leaders to take this content, take these things that we're producing and customize it and distribute it among themselves, it was like 3x the number of people that we're able to reach. And it's still not a huge number in comparison to how many developers overall we have, but it's still 300% more than what it would have been if it was just San Francisco. So I think that there is that awareness that comes for us for running events. One of the other things that I really think about in terms of business objectives is just like also the awareness of the art of the possible. A lot of people know that you can send messages on Slack, but they don't know that you can like integrate Jira on Slack. You can file expense reports without leaving Slack. I can literally take a picture with my phone and send it in a Slack message, and they don't know. And so providing the opportunity for like the art of what is possible to do and to spark those ideas is really important.
I used the reminder feature today after you brought it up in our prep call. It's pretty great.
/remind, man.
/remind.
Remind me to tell David, thanks for the plug, tomorrow at 9 a.m.
Did that just work? Did that just happen?
Not yet.
It's not voice activated.
Not voice activated yet. I need to like shake my phone and do a dance or something. But the other thing is that there's a lot of feedback that we get from people in real life events that you wouldn't necessarily get if I just asked them to submit a form. And connection that they feel to the product. Like people are passionate about Slack, and I'm like really passionate.
And how do you do that? I guess at scale or in an organized way? Because I guess I hear that a lot too. Like we get a lot of feedback at our events, but how does that not just disappear into the ether? Do you have a structure for collecting that feedback from the events?
Why, yes, we do. So there's 2 things. One is there is a form that goes out after in a survey, obviously. But there's also a workflow. We released this thing called Workflow Builder. It is available on all paid plans, and you can basically set up like tasks and forms. So I have in all of the leadership channels with all of the chapter members, they have a workflow that they can access and it's like super simple on your mobile phone while you're at the event after you talk to a person, and this is like whether it's a Slack person or whoever it is, and they can just fill out really quickly and it sends it to a channel, and then I can go back and look at that. And the cool thing about that is that like there's executives that troll that channel, and like I don't know because I don't get notifications when people join, so all of a sudden someone will be like, oh, that was a great piece of feedback, I passed it on the product team, and I'm like, where did you come from? Like, how did you know that? And then I realized, oh, they're in that channel.
Got it. And so, okay, so we'll kind of round out here with some more specific tactics on actually running the events. So we know why we want to do an event, and we're ready to go, whether we're launching it or we're helping a community member launch it. Probably the most popular challenge that everyone faces is nobody signed up. And I know you said that that's something that you struggle with even for Slack. Your hosts sometimes are like, it's Slack, everyone's going to come. And then 5 people show up and they're sad.
Absolutely. Like there is definitely a lot of expectation. And that is a thing. Like you're going to have, especially if your events are free, you're going to have at least 50% attrition.
Yep.
Depending on where you are in the world, you might have 70% attrition. There was an event that happened in Miami, and there was like 170 people that signed up for this poor chapter leaders event, and 38 people showed up. You know why? Because like other people's lives don't revolve around your product, and the people that are part of your community may not be as passionate as the people that are leading your communities. So they have a lot of expectations that like everyone's going to be as stoked as you are. I think someone actually commented on the Twitter thread today. They were like,
yes,
New Year's resolution, actually show up to an event I signed up for. Are you here tonight? See?
Nope, still not here.
So
we're going to have to tweet that they got a shout out and called out.
Called out. Better see you here in January. But I mean, I do it too. And so like, it is a struggle for everyone. There are certainly things that you can do to help alleviate that. I'm actually like, so depending on what kind of information that you have about people, like obviously you can email them. I have in previous roles used SMS texting to set if I have someone's phone number and their mobile phone and just be like 2 hours before, hey, don't forget, we're so excited to see you. This thing is happening. In other previous communities, so a long time ago, I used to work on a community for a company called SolidWorks. And we literally called every single person that registered. Like that was, you just set aside the day before. I'd call like 200 people who were registered for these events. The days that we didn't do that, like I remember one time where we had rented out this whole entire movie theater and like 15 people showed up out of like the 300 that had registered. And that was because someone decided like phone calls are a waste of time. The emails are a waste of time. People registered, they'll come. Like the reminder that we sent them 3 days ago is enough. And that was like 10 years ago when there was not as much competition for your attention. So it's a struggle for everybody.
Yeah, I would just like double tap on that. And if there's anything I've learned about getting people to show up to events, it really is just like doing that legwork. Like CMX Summit, we grew from 400 to 1,000 in this last event. I probably sent 250 personal emails, one at a time, to people, like promoting the event and asking them to come.
And like those are the things that people don't think of as scalable, but like they're so fucking important. Like it's okay to do things that you can't automate or that aren't scalable if they are effective. Like when you think about what is the return of the time of those 250 emails, it was that all of those people showed up. And then
not all of them.
Well, okay, so not all of them, but I bet more of them showed up than if you hadn't said that email.
Of course, yes.
So it was worth the time that you spent. And I think that that's the way that I also feel. It's like the diligence, like you have to put in the legwork. And so setting those expectations with the people that are running my events and letting them know that like, yes, Slack is a name that you recognize, but like, trust me, not everybody does. Like my brother in Utah is like, what is a Slack? Is that a thing I can buy? No.
Anything else on tactics that help to get people in the door and get people, well, I guess there's RSVP and also to actually show up after the RSVP.
I think that like just that communication is really important. So whether like figure out what are the channels that people respond to you, like you may not be able to directly measure and say those 250 emails or those 13 phone calls or whatever it is that you did, but that like if you're hitting it up on the social media and you send an email reminder, and if you're in the Slack workspace, maybe you have a reminder notification that goes out to everyone in the channel. All of those things do add up, because if you have 10 people that have registered and 3 of them get reminded, and those other 7 maybe see it somewhere else, but they don't see the thing that you intended them to see, they may still come. So I think like hit all of your channels and hit the ones that work the best for you a little bit harder.
For sure. I have 2 quick tips on that. One channel that we just tried for these events is actually LinkedIn events. They launched a new events tool. And so we created another event on LinkedIn for these and had people still register through our event page, but LinkedIn's like giving it a lot of juice right now. So a little tip is repost your events on LinkedIn, and you can go through all your connections and invite them. They make you do it manually, which is good, so you don't spam. But I literally just search by like San Francisco and like invited all the community managers.
And that's all still free, right? That whole functionality.
Totally free.
Yeah. use
Yeah,
that.
so I did that last month, and this event grew a lot. We had 120 people RCP for that, and then we didn't do that this time, but like we had 70, again 50% here. We had 70 RCPs for this completely organically. So my second tip is just like the consistency. We do it the first Tuesday of every month, by the way, if you were wondering. Every first Tuesday of every month, we host a CMX Connect event. It happens every month. So we're starting to see more regular faces and people get into a habit and routine. Even if they miss one, they know there's going to be another one coming up.
Yeah.
And that helps build momentum over time.
+1.
Sweet. All right. Now, the actual event itself. What has worked really well for you to make an event? If you're collecting the survey feedback and people are telling you what they love or don't love, what are things that like haven't gone well at all at events, and what are things that seem to go really well to make events more engaging and valuable and worth coming back to?
So one thing that doesn't go well is if the host or the leader doesn't have a good hold on the sponsors.
Mm.
Fitbit is lovely, and it was a wonderfully perfect amount of commercial. I think that like that is no, but like honestly, like when you are at an event, like obviously you're at a free event, someone paid for you to eat something, they paid for you to drink something, like you're getting information and knowledge, they're getting you in their space. That's all great. But like they have to promote themselves too. And there is a fine balance between being like, thank you for hosting our event. Here's what they do. Here's how you can figure out what's interesting afterwards if you want to know more. And having someone go through 43 slides and tell you like the nitty gritty of your product details when you're like, cool story, man. Like that's not my industry, but like thanks for the things. I like to sit on the couch, like in the case, like. But so I think like that actually like seriously like that's a thing though, like that like that turns people off from events. And so being really clear with your sponsors and like what the expectations are, at previous roles, like we said, you get 3 slides and you get a minute and a half and I will come and pull you off the stage. Like that's what it's going to be. And also like, so that's one thing that we like really are kind of get feedback on, that I have to kind of pass back to the chapter leaders, like, hey, I know you need sponsors, and like, but also we'll support you if you can't find them. So don't feel like you have to sell out your event in order to get someone to sponsor it. Other kind of things that feedback wise, or being organized is so important. Sometimes when you have, especially when you have people that are just starting out doing events, whether it's for your company or it is for like as a volunteer led thing, you're not as organized, you're not as tightly wound. So like having an agenda it seems so simple and elementary, but like a lot of people forget that it's important to set expectations. And that experience, if that expectation isn't set, and then you show up and you get a 20-minute commercial from a sponsor, like, are you coming back? I'm not coming back. Like, I don't care how short the walk is. I'm not coming. So I think that like that is one thing to keep in mind, right? Things that work well are being really proactive in communicating what the content is going to be, making sure people feel really welcome, having enough people to help you as volunteers. That's one thing that like sometimes people think like I can do it all by myself, but you don't always have the luxury of having someone check people in and making sure that pizza boxes get thrown away. And so like finding those internal volunteers to help make the experience of the event be great. And then delivering on those promises. Like if you say you're going to talk about XYZ, don't talk about ABC. So, I mean, I can keep going, but like, I don't want to.
These are great. Yeah. Any others that come to mind?
I think the one other thing is like, be courteous and follow up. People forget that what you do after the event, or it's easy to forget, like especially when you're on the high of running an event, you're like, yes, it's done. I'm like, yeah, I don't have to talk to another person. And you forget that you need to provide something for people afterwards, right? Like you need to give them the thank you. Like it actually matters a lot to some people on whether or not they want to be part of your community if you extend that courtesy. And just send a follow-up thank you email. If you don't use email because you use Slack, which is totally fine also, then send a follow-up Slack message. Like wherever you connect with people, send that thank you message, send them the content that you had so that they have access to it. Ungate those things so that it's not trouble to get at it, like reduce that friction. And then also give them the promise. I mean, like you were saying with having the consistency of events, that's one thing that I always am telling chapter leaders. I'm like, don't think of this as a one-time thing. Like this is something that you're extending out over the year. So like when you send those thank yous, set that in their head right then. Like we're going to meet up next second Tuesday of next month and we're going to talk about X and not A.
We have that slide coming up right after the Q&A.
He didn't even prime me for that.
Yeah, well done. Yeah, I 100% agree. And like totally feel that pain of after the events, you get so tired. I just go into the woods by myself usually, or just like get lost where no people are.
I come home and my boyfriend is like, yeah, I'm going to go sit in the other room. You just take the space, babe.
But that is like the prime opportunity to like all your event attendees are at this like high point and they're feeling the energy, and it's such a prime opportunity to like make the ask that you wanted to make or follow up and get the feedback while it's fresh. So my recommendation is plan all that ahead of time. So after the event, you're not doing any thinking or work. It's kind of already automated and ready to go, and collect that feedback. Like even this event where even this month we're trying something different that we didn't do last month because of feedback we got on the way we structured discussion groups. And so hopefully if you came last month and now you see the way we adapted it, you feel like you're heard, and it just really makes it feel very included for everyone in the community. Awesome. Well, we'll pause there. We'll give a big round of applause to Elizabeth.